On the last day of 2024, I am excited to welcome my first-time guest on the show today, Dr. Kenneth Lipman. Welcome to Talk to Me, Africa. I am so honored that you accepted to come to the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Let me tell my audience about you a little bit. Dr. Kenneth Lipman is a scientist with a sense of humor that made me laugh. You have a PhD in integrative or holistic health and an MS in psychology. You are a former member of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, which is the largest future exchange in the world. And you meditate daily, and you are a recovering atheist. On weekends, you play the guitar and the piano at jams. Welcome again to Talk to Me, Africa.
Thank you.
When I read your bio, I was a little bit curious. Who is a recovering atheist?
Well, I went through different belief systems. I was raised as an Orthodox Jew, and then I rejected that philosophy or religion for a while. I didn't reject Judaism, but I wasn't sure if I believed in God. And then when I learned how to meditate at age 35, it brought me back to God. So I'm a very spiritual person now.
That's good. So besides that, tell us a fun fact about yourself, something that people would, not normally know about you.
You stopped me there. I've been playing guitar and piano since age 7.
Wow.
And I know probably 1,000 songs by heart.
That is excellent. Well, again, welcome to Talk to Me, Africa.
Yeah.
And so today we want to talk about circumcision. And I'm going to be borrowing from your book, which is titled Circumcision, How an Ancient Ritual Became a Questionable Surgery, a complete analysis. First of all, what made you want to research about circumcision?
So that gets to my other belief systems. My parents were Holocaust survivors. And so from a very young age, I had the thought that I want to save Jews. I even imagined myself going back in time and saving Jews during the Holocaust. So that was one part of my brain. The second part was I was raised Orthodox, and then I noticed some inconsistencies in the Torah. The Torah is the Hebrew Bible. It's more or less equivalent to the Old Testament. And in the first chapter of Genesis is the Garden of Eden story. And it says that God created Adam and Eve in his own image. Then in the second chapter, it retells the Garden of Eden story. And it says, God created Eve from Adam's rib. And then when I went back and reread it, I was looking at the first chapter again, and I said, where's the rib? Why didn't the rib appear in the first version of the story? Even as a child, I noticed that. And I just assumed it was my misunderstanding. But in later years, the thought niggled at my brain, what's going on here? And then eventually, in my 30s, came the third part. I started losing sexual sensitivity. And that almost always happens to circumcised men over a period of time. Because I should explain a little bit what circumcision is. Maybe
yes, what is circumcision? Yeah, let's start with that.
Okay. So first we have to understand that the foreskin is a sheath that covers the penis. It's sort of like the peel of a banana. And on the outside of the peel, you want it to be hard and tough. And on the inside of the peel, it's moist and keeps the banana warm and moist, so it's tasty. It's the same thing with the penis. The outside has to be tough enough to prevent harm from exterior elements. But the inside is moist with oils called smegma. And why do you have those oils? Because when the penis becomes erect and goes into the vagina during intercourse, the vagina is also warm and moist, and they interact well that way. You don't want a hard object going into a moist vagina. So that is why it was constructed that way. And all mammals, all male mammals have a foreskin. So circumcision is the process of removing part or all of the foreskin. And when you remove it, that interior part of the penis that used to be covered by the foreskin is now exposed to exterior elements, and it wasn't created for that. And over time, the abrasion of the exterior elements creates a callus on the penis. And by the time you're in your 30s, it's up to 10 layers of cells deep, this callus. And so it reduces sensitivity. And that's why that happens. So all these things came together, and by the time I was in my 50s already, I started thinking about how I can save Jewish boys from circumcision is really what it came down to, and whether the Torah commandment to circumcise had validity. And that's how I ended up writing the book. But eventually I cover all kinds of circumcision. So I should also indicate that there's two major types of circumcision. There's religious circumcision, which is practiced by Jews and Muslims. But also, since we're talking about Africa, it's also practiced by some African tribes.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, whether it's a religious ceremony or an ethnic ceremony can be debated, but it is practiced by some African tribes for thousands of years now. And the other type of circumcision is medical circumcision, where a doctor says you need to remove the circumcision because of health benefits. It has nothing to do with religion. And America, the majority of boys in America are circumcised because of medical reasons. What they claim is medical reasons. But my book demonstrates that there is no medical benefit to circumcision.
I don't think they explain to the parents the medical benefit before they do it, because I have a son who was circumcised. Growing up, I did see people circumcised. I mean, I just think it's something that has to be done. So I didn't get the education or the reason or explanation from the doctor why my child had to be circumcised the very next day after he was born. So does this circumcision provide any medical benefit health-wise to the children?
No, there's no. The short answer is no. There's no medical benefit. It's not true that there's a medical benefit. And not only isn't there a medical benefit, but as you're describing with most parents, there is not what is called informed consent. In other words, you are not explained the pluses and minuses of circumcision. They just tell you to do it. And that's not right. The medicine requires informed consent, but informed consent is not done with circumcision.
It's not. And so when it happened with my son, I remember the doctor had said, do not apply anything on the circumcised area. And when I would put a diaper on, it would touch the diaper, especially when he pees, he would cry. So I began applying Vaseline like, this hurts. So I think there should be more information given to the parents before that is done, even if they know they're going to accept, at least tell them.
Yes. So you're raising a lot of good points. So not only does it serve no medical purpose, but it's extremely painful. The pain is equivalent to torture. And it not only during the procedure, but for weeks afterwards, the pain persists. And that is tremendous trauma for an infant. They are not prepared for that kind of trauma. And it really causes changes in the brain. We've noticed with a study that even 6 months afterwards, infants are hypersensitive to pain compared to non-circumcised boys. And it could last a lifetime. We don't know. It hasn't been studied, but it seems to me that it does.
Now we seem to ignore the pain of these babies, and we just look at the circumcised area and say, oh, it's healed. But you're a psychologist. Do they face any psychological effect beyond that
Yes,
infanthood
they
because they were
do.
circumcised.
Yeah, I mean, we believe they do. It hasn't been proven. It seems like that they remain hypersensitive to pain and that the trauma creates a lot of other psychological problems. Yes, for sure. I believe that that's the case.
Now, I saw my cousins, some of my cousins, I grew up in Cameroon. Some of my cousins were circumcised as teenagers. Not my siblings. I didn't see that my siblings. I think my mother said she did it when my kids, my brothers were all very little. But I did see my cousins circumcised as teenagers. And I cannot forget the way they were walking in the yard. I cannot forget the screams when they would go to use the bathroom. Is this worth it?
It's not worth it. It serves no purpose. I believe we don't know how circumcision started, but it seems like the problems all came about because of hygiene. So the penis needs to be cleaned periodically under the foreskin if you have a foreskin. You just need to rinse it with some water. If you don't do that, it becomes smelly and possibly you can get a fungal infection. So in ancient times, someone figured out, and it probably developed independently in different places, but we know in Egypt, they were circumcising as long as 10,000 years ago. We know this from mummies. So it seems they figured out, well, just lop it off rather than have a problem. They didn't think about the pain or the consequences of doing that. They just said it makes it easier to clean, but they didn't understand what they were doing thousands of years ago, and we maintain the tradition unthinkingly.
Unthinkingly, it is. And you do say that the pain of circumcision is equivalent to torture.
Yes.
Why is anesthesia rarely used if it is indeed that painful?
Okay, so to answer that, first of all, we have to separate out the different kinds of circumcision. So Jewish and Muslim circumcision started thousands of years ago. And in those days, people didn't use anesthesia. So that's how they still do it. Now, as far as medical circumcision, which is done in a hospital, you would think, well, there they would use anesthesia, but they usually don't. And here's the reasons. Number one, you cannot use a general anesthetic with an infant.
Okay.
You have to use a local anesthetic. But most doctors rely on institutions that they trust to make decisions for their medical practice. An individual doctor cannot do research on his own. He's busy with patients. And the institution they trust in, at least in America, is called the Center for Disease Control, CDC. And they have said that pain is not a problem with circumcision. However, they base that on one study which only measured pain with anesthesia. So, of course, they found that the pain wasn't a problem, but without anesthesia, it's very difficult. But the real reason anesthesia is not used is because of money. It takes 45 minutes to do the anesthesia with a local injection. First, you put some what's called amla cream on the site. It takes 15 minutes to set in. This cream is lidocaine.
Okay.
Then you give the injection of lidocaine, similar to an injection you would get for tooth surgery. And that takes a half hour to set in. So that's 45 minutes the doctor would have to wait. And they don't want to wait. They have an assembly line of circumcisers. Circumcision is an extremely profitable industry, not just because they get paid for the procedure, but also because the foreskin, after it's removed, is taken by the hospital and processed. And cells called fibroblasts are extracted from the foreskin. These fibroblasts are the repair cells of the body, and they are extremely valuable.
Okay.
And the hospital sells these fibroblasts to companies for a lot of money. So the companies then turn around and make several products from these fibroblasts. One is for skin grafts, and one product is called dermagraft, for example, for burn victims. But the biggest, most profitable use of fibroblasts is for cosmetics. Primarily women use vials of these fibroblasts and put them on their face and other areas of their body for cosmetic reasons. In fact, there are several spas in Hollywood that administer them. They are called penis facials. And women pay a lot of money for them. And last I knew, there was a 2-year waiting list to get these penis facials. And movie stars have touted them on talk shows. So the hospital, back to the hospital, they want to process this assembly line as quickly as possible. Babies can't complain. The parents don't view the surgery. And so why bother? That's their thinking.
Is it legal? And now I think about it a lot. So you're taking a part of my baby's body and selling it somewhere without letting me know. Is that?
Yes, it shouldn't be legal, but I'm not a lawyer, so I can't rule on it. I do discuss legality of circumcision. There's a lot of debate about it, but there's never been a court that has ruled against it so far. So
Yeah.
I hope that there has been attempts, and there are continuing attempts to challenge this in court in various places around the world. But so far it has failed. And part of the problem is sensitivity to Jewish and Muslim populations. Prevents a lot of pushback against circumcision in addition to the financial benefits.
Yeah. I know this is not, this is out of topic, but does a similar thing happen with placenta?
I
Or not
know
that you know of?
they do extract stem cells from placentas and use them in various places to create stem cells. So, but the placenta has no value after birth, so there's no ethical question, I think, of using a placenta because it's going to be thrown out anyhow.
Yeah.
So, but with the foreskin, there is an ethical question because it serves a purpose.
Okay. All right. So does circumcision therefore improve the sexual health of a male or
No,
of
it
their
destroys it.
partner?
It destroys it because 90% of the erogenous tissue of the penis is on the foreskin. So if you remove that, you've lost 90% of your erogenous tissue. And as I mentioned, what's left becomes less sensitive over time as the callus builds up. So for the man, it's a disaster, and rates of erectile dysfunction for men are a lot higher than for non-circumcised men, or we call it intact men. But in addition to that, sex is a lot more painful and difficult for women who have sex with circumcised men because, as I mentioned, the penis is now harder and creates more friction when it's in the vagina. But also, the circumcised man, because he's missing so many nerves, does not have a proper would be the wrong word, the usual thrusting rhythm and depth. So often women have trouble having orgasm with a circumcised man, even if they don't feel the friction. So it ruins sex for both partners.
I mean, you get me thinking a lot because if you ask me why my kid was circumcised, I have no answer. I just think it was something that we do. I don't know what the benefits are like you're talking about right now. I don't understand why it is just done, but it is something that is just done. And I
Well,
remember
I
my
can
mom.
explain the history if you want a little more in
Yeah, go
America.
ahead.
Okay. So so as I said, Egyptian circumcision started 10,000 years ago. Then probably the Jews picked it up from the Egyptians thousands of years ago. And then the Muslims picked it up from the Jews. But when Christianity came along, the Christians said, you don't need to circumcise. That's in the New Testament. There's several verses that say you don't need to circumcise. And so it stopped. And most of the Western world stopped circumcising thousands of years ago, around the time Christianity started. However, in Victorian times, there was a tremendous fear of masturbation.
Okay.
They felt that masturbation ruined a boy's life. And John Harvey Kellogg, the inventor of Kellogg's cornflakes, the cereals, among other people, said the only way to stop boys from masturbating is to circumcise them. So that him and others started modern circumcision in the West. And that's persisted ever since, but they never found. There is some small medical benefits. It's easier to clean the penis, but you save a few seconds a day. That's all you save. There's less chance of getting human papilloma virus, HPV. That's definitely true. If you're circumcised, you are less likely to be infected with HPV. However, we now have a vaccine called Gardasil 9, which prevents getting infected with HPV. It's nearly 100% effective. It's one of the most effective vaccines ever created. And the CDC, which I mentioned before, recommends that boys and girls get this Gardasil 9 vaccine at age 12. So if you get the vaccine, you don't need to circumcise. That is the only possible medical benefits. There's less chance of getting penile cancer if you're circumcised, but penile cancer is so rare, you have more of a chance of being hit by lightning than getting it. And it's not even fatal usually. So there's really no medical reason to circumcise. There's one more wave of circumcision. Since we're talking to Africa, this is the last wave. So in the early 2000s, there was a wave of AIDS in Africa, and many people were dying, and it was horrible. And in those years, AIDS was extremely virulent. It's less virulent now because as most viruses evolve, they become less virulent. But in those years, there was a tremendous death rate from circumcision in Africa, from AIDS in Africa. So in 2007, they did 3 studies, which supposedly showed that circumcision reduces your chance of being infected with HIV, which is the cause of AIDS.
Okay.
But the studies, as I explain in my book, the studies do not hold up to scrutiny. They were not well done, and it is not true. And in fact, after that, they tried mass circumcision campaigns in Africa, in many different countries, and they all failed to reduce the incidence of AIDS. And they've tried to replicate those studies in other countries, and they couldn't. So it's not true that circumcision reduces the incidence of AIDS, but because of that, there's a lot of money still going into Africa to circumcise people. And unfortunately, in Africa, a lot of those circumcisions are done as tribal practices or at home with less sterile conditions.
Some are, yes.
So there's a high death rate. In fact, the United Nations World Health Organization calls the death rate from circumcision in Africa, quote, alarmingly high, end quote. So that is the last strain of circumcision in history that's gone through, and it's very unfortunate.
And so if it doesn't prevent the incidence of AIDS, it also doesn't for things like urinary tract infections?
No, there was one study that said it reduces the incidence of urinary tract infections done a long time ago, but that study has been refuted. Everybody since has said that's not true. And in fact, it increases your chance of urinary tract infections because the area where you do the circumcision itself can become infected. and go down the urinary tract. The infection can, travel to the urinary tract. So it increases your chance of
Wow.
getting it.
Let's talk about, the significance of circumcision on the physical and mental health of those circumcised, especially as teenagers.
Yeah, so, well, as I said, you lose sexual sensitivity, plus you have the trauma of the pain. And so you also have a lot of other side effects. For example, as I mentioned, the foreskin evolved to protect the penis.
Mm-hmm.
Take that foreskin away and your penis is bumping into things. You can catch on a zipper, which has happened to me. There's a lot of problems. And you can irritate your sexual partner. So all of this causes less enjoyable sex, less frequency of sex, less frequency of masturbation, which is a healthy practice, especially if you're single, and leads to less life satisfaction.
You just mentioned that masturbation is a healthy practice. Some people might say, no, it's not. Can you throw more light on that?
There are a lot of moral objections to masturbation, and if you believe in that, I can't say you're wrong, but from a medical perspective, masturbation is a healthy practice. There's no reason to condemn it.
Mm-hmm. Now, I did see some editorial reviews on your book, which I really liked. This one said Lipman's text distills a wealth of medical literature, biochemical science, biomechanical science, excuse me, and historical lore into lucid, down-to-earth prose, while presenting a cutting critique of the industry that exploits circumcision customs. Traditionalists will find much here to dispute, but the author's impressive marshalling of evidence and logic makes this one of the most persuasive briefs against circumcision in print. So how successful are you so far in preventing the circumcision of young Jewish boys?
Well, my book just came out a few weeks
Yes.
ago, so
Mhm.
will my book be successful in reducing circumcision? Hopefully, yes, but
Hopefully,
only
yes.
time will tell.
So you did draw from 869 research references and first-hand accounts.
Yes.
How was it like talking to some people face to face and getting first-hand accounts during your
Uh,
research?
it was an interesting experience. Everybody had a different reaction. Some people
Mm-hmm.
were very cooperative, and some people didn't want to talk about it. And so, I mean, with a lot of men, when I mention the word I say I'm writing a book. They say, "What did you write about?" And I said circumcision, and I got a nervous laugh from a lot of men. Uh, Women were a little more intrigued, but because they didn't have the emotional reaction a man would have.
Mm-hmm.
But some women retorted, "Well, why don't you write about female circumcision?"
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Because male circumcision is the topic that I'm concerned about.
Mm-hmm.
I think female circumcision is an important topic, but I can't address both in one book.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I will write a book about circumcision for
Mm-hmm.
females." Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Were some of those men whom you spoke to have any regrets about being circumcised, if they were, or if they were not?
They usually don't because they don't know better. So that's good. Like a critical point of this whole discussion is the circumcised man has no point of reference for how it would feel to have a foreskin.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, he doesn't know what he's missing.
Mm-hmm.
He just knows he starts experiencing erectile dysfunction in his 30s. He thought it was normal,
Mm-hmm.
or he can't masturbate well. He thought that's the way things are. That's how we're created, but we weren't created that way. It's just from his circumcision.
Mm-hmm.
But I should also say there's different levels of circumcision. So Jewish circumcision removes 100% of the foreskin,
Okay.
but Muslim circumcision removes not 100%, varying amounts, because for Jewish circumcision, there's very strict written protocols, exactly what to do and how to do it. But Muslim circumcision has no written protocols. It's just a tradition that's been passed down, and everybody does it a little differently. But generally, you do not remove 100% of the foreskin. The same thing with medical circumcision done in a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
100% of the foreskin is not removed because the surgery serves no purpose.
Mm-hmm.
They just remove as much as they feel like doing. In fact, my friend had his son circumcised in a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
The doctor said to him, "How much do you want to remove?" "I'll remove whatever you tell me to do because it's pointless." The doctor didn't
Yes,
use the
they
word
asked.
pointless.
Nobody
He didn't
asked
use
me.
the word, but that was the implication. I'll take off whatever you tell me. It doesn't matter to me. So obviously it served no purpose. It's a cosmetic procedure. In fact, Medicare, which is the government aid for indigent and elderly people,
Mm-hmm.
categorizes circumcision as a cosmetic procedure.
Okay. Not a necessity.
No, so in medical circumcision, so the less you remove, the less sexual problems you have, is what I'll conclude from that.
All right. So if it's considered a cosmetic procedure, again, I wasn't asked if I wanted that cosmetic procedure to happen to
Right.
my child. So, well, this is very interesting. I've learned a lot researching about this book, and I really want to read it. I love the reviews so far. Somebody
Oh,
said
thank you.
this is a book I didn't know I needed to read, but I'm extremely grateful it landed on my laps. I think that's me as well. I was like, oh, circumcision. Okay, well, yeah, it's something you have to do. Is it necessary? Yes, no.
Right.
But knowing that there are not many benefits to it, it's an eye opener to me.
Yes.
And
Thank you.
yeah, I think it's something that
Well,
needs
I
to be
read a lot
about.
I spent a year just reading the studies before I wrote the book. And
Mhm.
every book I read, an article I read had a tiny piece of the puzzle. But I
Mhm.
wanted to write a comprehensive book, a one-stop source that had everything you wanted to know about circumcision. That was my
Mhm.
goal, and I feel like I achieved it. And
I
that's what
think
the
you
reviews are
did.
saying. Yes, thank
I
you.
think you did. And you do say that every year millions of baby boys are circumcised, either for purported health benefits or for religious reasons, which you've explained here. And so this book provides a comprehensive and clear explanation of the risks and rewards
Mhm.
of the practice, which has significant effects on sexuality, psychology, and overall health. I think my aha moment here is psychological effect. Who knew?
Yeah,
Who
right.
knew? Yeah. Well, I don't know if you have anything else to add to this before I ask you my last question.
Um, I think I covered everything unless there's I can go in more detail about any of the aspects, but I think I
Yeah.
covered everything. Yeah,
So your book is called Circumcision, How an Ancient Ritual Became a Questionable Surgery, a Complete Analysis. And so we can find the book on Amazon, correct?
it's on Amazon. It's in paperback, hardcover, ebook, and audiobook, and it's also on Kindle Unlimited.
I'm definitely going to be reading this book. Thank you so much for
Sure.
accepting to be on Talk to Me Africa today. I did give you an assignment, which I do to every of my guests, to bring a wise word or a proverb to share with the audience today. Do you have any for us?
Well, the only thing I'll say is the medical dictum, do no harm, should
Do
be
no harm.
what they should be doing with circumcision. Yes.
Well, Dr.
Is there
Liebman,
any
thank you.
questions from the audience, from the,
No, no. Usually do this on weekends. I think today people are busy. I had the day off, so I
oh,
thought I could do it today, but no, I have no question from the audience today.
all
Yeah,
right, okay.
yeah. But if any comes, I'll definitely forward it to you later. Thank you so much for
You're welcome.
being on Talk to Me Africa today, and I hope we can talk another time. Have a
Yes,
wonderful
of
end of
course.
year and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.